Some people spend their whole lives being underestimated. Jack Miller was one of them. For 10 years, he fixed broken engines for a woman who never once said thank you. She threw them at his feet like garbage, paid him less than he was worth, and looked at him like he was nothing more than a pair of greasy hands. Her name was Victoria Sterling. She ran one of the largest auto parts corporations in the state. And for a decade, she used Jack's small garage as a dumping ground, sending him the engines nobody else wanted to touch, expecting him to work miracles for pocket change. Jack never complained. He had a daughter to raise, a promise to keep, and a quiet kind of pride that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Then, one autumn morning, everything Victoria Sterling had built came crashing down. And the only person left standing between her and total ruin was the man she'd spent 10 years treating like dirt. This is their story. Miller's Auto Repair sat on the corner of Maple and Ninth, a squat brick building with a faded red sign and a gravel lot that always smelled like motor oil and coffee. Jack Miller had inherited the place from his father, and his father before him. It wasn't much, 1 lift, 2 bays, an office that doubled as a storage closet, but it was his. Jack was 34 when his wife, Diane, passed away after a short illness, leaving him alone with a 6-year-old daughter named Grace. He remembered that first year like a fog. Waking up before dawn to make her lunch. Working until his hands cracked. Falling asleep in the office chair more nights than he could count. "Daddy, why do you always smell like the garage?" "Because the garage pays for your ballet shoes, kiddo." Grace grew up on that gravel lot. She did her homework on a stool by the tool bench. She learned to tell a wrench from a socket before she learned her multiplication tables. And she watched her father work himself to the bone, never once hearing him complain. It was in Grace's 9th year that Victoria Sterling first walked through the garage doors. Victoria Sterling was 31 years old and already running Sterling Auto Parts, a company her father had built from nothing and handed to her when his heart gave out. She was sharp, ambitious, and utterly convinced that money solved every problem worth solving. She arrived at Miller's Auto Repair in a Blacktown car, trailed by an assistant carrying a clipboard. In the truck bed behind her was a busted, oil-soaked V6 engine, ripped clean out of a company vehicle. "You're Miller? I was told you're cheap and you don't ask questions." "I don't know about cheap. But I don't ask questions I don't need answered." "Good. I need this fixed by Friday." "I don't care how. I don't care what it costs in parts, but I'm not paying you a mechanic's premium. You'll take what I offer, and you'll be grateful for the work." Jack looked at the ruined engine, then at the woman standing over it in a blazer that cost more than his monthly rent. He thought about the stack of bills on his kitchen counter. He thought about Grace's shoes, worn thin at the toes. Friday it is. That was the first engine. It would not be the last. What started as one broken engine became a pattern, and the pattern became a decade. Victoria never delivered them herself again after that first day. She sent drivers. She sent invoices with numbers already decided. She sent terse emails that read less like requests and more like commands. Miller, 3 units attached. Same rate as always. Don't bother negotiating. Jack never negotiated. He simply worked. Nights. Weekends. Early mornings before Grace woke for school. He became, without ever choosing the title, the secret reason Sterling Auto Parts could quietly recall and repair thousands of dollars in damaged inventory without anyone in the press ever finding out how many of their engines were failing before they even left the lot. Jack noticed the pattern before anyone else did. The wear marks. The stress fractures. The same manufacturing flaw, again and again, hidden inside engine casings that should have been recalled outright. He tried, more than once, to say something. "I need to speak with Miss Sterling. It's about the engines. There's a defect in the block casting. It's not random. It's happening on every unit from the same. Miss Sterling doesn't take calls from vendors, Mr. Miller. Send it in writing." He sent it in writing. 3 times over 3 years. He never received a reply. Meanwhile, Grace grew up watching her father drive himself into the ground for a company that didn't know his first name. "Dad, why do you keep working for her? She doesn't even pay you what you're worth. Everyone at school says her company's engines are junk." Grace didn't fully understand it then, but she never forgot it. By year 7, Jack had stopped counting the engines. He'd built a private log instead, a notebook in his office drawer, where he tracked every serial number, every defect, every batch that came from the same supplier. He wasn't trying to build a case against anyone. He simply couldn't stop himself from noticing patterns. It was the mechanic in him. What he found troubled him. The defective batch wasn't shrinking. It was growing. And Sterling Auto Parts kept installing those engines into new vehicles anyway, betting that the failure rate was low enough to stay under the radar. One evening, a driver dropping off yet another wrecked engine mentioned something in passing. Companies cutting corners hard lately. Heard they switched suppliers to save money on the casting alloy. Ms. Sterling pushed it through herself, over engineering's objections. Jack felt something cold settle in his stomach. He tried one more time. He drove, uninvited, to the Sterling Auto Parts headquarters, a glass tower downtown that made his garage look like a showbox. He waited 2 hours in the lobby before a junior assistant finally let him upstairs, more out of pity than protocol. Ms. Sterling, I've fixed hundreds of your engines over the years. There's a pattern. The block casting from your new supplier is failing under thermal stress. It's not one bad batch, it's systemic. If you don't pull back now, this is going to become a recall you can't control. Mr. Miller, I appreciate your concern, but I have a full engineering department for a reason. You fix what we send you. You don't design what we build. With respect, I've had my hands inside more of your engines than your engineering department has. I'm not telling you how to run your company. I'm telling you what I'm seeing on my lift, every single week. And I'm telling you that your job is to keep your mouth shut and cash the check. That arrangement has worked for 10 years. Don't ruin it now by pretending you understand my business. Jack left the building that day and never brought it up again. He kept fixing the engines. He kept his notebook. And he kept his silence, because a man with a daughter to raise doesn't get the luxury of burning bridges for pride alone. Grace turned 18 the same autumn the first news reports started trickling in. A minor recall notice. A regional news segment about vehicles stalling on the highway. A lawsuit filed by a family in the next state over, alleging a Sterling Auto Parts engine failure caused a serious accident. Victoria Sterling dismissed it publicly as an isolated incident. Behind closed doors, it was anything but isolated. More lawsuits followed. Then an internal whistleblower, an engineer Victoria herself had once overruled, leaked documents to a national outlet, revealing that leadership had known about the casting defect for years and chosen profit margins over safety recalls. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, Sterling Auto Parts stock had dropped 40%. By Friday, their two largest retail partners had suspended all orders. Jack read about it in the newspaper over his morning coffee, Grace sitting across from him, now a young woman studying at community college with dreams of becoming an automotive engineer herself, dreams her father's quiet example had planted years ago without either of them realizing it. Dad, isn't this the company you've been fixing engines for all these years? Yeah, Gracie. That's them. Did you know about the defect? I tried to tell her. More than once. Grace didn't say anything else. She just reached across the table and squeezed her father's oil-stained hand. It happened faster than anyone expected. Within 2 months, Sterling Auto Parts filed for bankruptcy protection. The board forced Victoria out as CEO, citing gross negligence and a decade of ignored internal warnings. Her personal assets were frozen pending litigation. The glass tower downtown was put up for sale before the ink on the bankruptcy filing had even dried. The woman who once commanded rooms with a single sentence now found herself sitting in a lawyer's office, signing away everything her father had built, and everything she'd built on top of it. Ms. Sterling, I have to ask, is there anyone, any vendor, any employee, who might have documentation supporting an earlier awareness of the casting defect? It could help mitigate personal liability if we can show internal warnings were dismissed by engineering, not just by you. Victoria sat in silence for a long moment. Her mind drifted, unbidden, to a mechanic in a small garage on Maple Street, standing in her office all those years ago, telling her exactly what was coming. There's someone. I don't know if he'll talk to me. It was raining the afternoon Victoria Sterling walked back into Miller's Auto Repair, not in a town car this time, but in a rideshare, wearing a coat that had clearly seen better winters. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped through the same door she'd once walked through with such command. Jack was under a sedan when he heard the bell above the door. He rolled out on the creeper, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked up. Ms. Sterling. Mr. Miller. I need to ask you something, and I have no right to ask it. Jack stood up slowly. 10 years of unpaid respect, of dismissed warnings, of engines dumped like trash at his feet. All of it sat quietly in the space between them. Go ahead and ask. The lawsuits, they're going to take everything. My lawyers think if we can show the company's engineering team dismissed independent warnings that came from outside, it could separate my personal liability from the corporate negligence claims. I remembered. You tried to warn me. More than once. I have your letters somewhere, if I haven't destroyed them. I need to know if you kept any records. Any proof of what you found in those engines. Jack didn't answer right away. He walked to his office, opened the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet that hadn't been touched in years, and pulled out a worn spiral notebook. 10 years of handwritten entries. Serial numbers. Failure patterns. Dates. Every warning he'd ever tried to give her, documented in his own careful hand, long before he ever imagined it would matter to anyone but himself. Every engine you ever sent me is in there. Every defect I found. Every time I tried to tell you and got sent to voicemail. Why did you keep this? Because it's my job to know what's wrong with what's in front of me, whether anyone's listening or not. Victoria stared at the notebook, then at the man who'd kept it. She'd spent 10 years assuming Jack Miller was exactly what she'd needed him to be. Cheap, quiet, disposable. It had never once occurred to her that he might be the most honest person in her entire orbit. I treated you terribly. For 10 years. I paid you less than you deserved. I never said thank you. And when you tried to warn me, the one time it actually mattered, I told you to keep your mouth shut and cash the check. You did. I don't understand why you're helping me now. Because my daughter used to ask me the same thing. Why I kept fixing your engines when you never respected the work. And I told her it wasn't about you. It was about doing the job right, whether anyone's watching or not. That doesn't stop being true just because you're the one who needs help now. He slid the notebook across the counter toward her. Take it. Give it to your lawyers. It won't undo what happened to the people that lawsuit's about. But it's the truth, and the truth ought to count for something. Victoria's composure, famous in boardrooms across the state, finally cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth and, for the first time in longer than she could remember, allowed herself to cry in front of another person. Thank you. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Nobody deserves a second chance, Miss Sterling. That's what makes it a gift instead of a debt. Jack's notebook became a key piece of evidence, not in freeing Victoria from consequence entirely, but in proving that a lone voice outside the company had raised the alarm years before the scandal broke, and that leadership inside Sterling Auto Parts had actively silenced it. The distinction mattered. Victoria lost her fortune, her company, and her reputation among her old peers. But she avoided criminal liability, and a portion of the settlement was redirected, at her own insistence, toward the families whose lives had been upended by the defective engines. 6 months later, a small sign went up beside the faded red one at Miller's Auto Repair. Sterling and Miller Automotive Diagnostics, honesty first. I can't fix engines the way you can, but I know how to run a business, and I know how to make sure it never repeats what I let happen the first time. If you'll let me, I want to build something with you. Something honest, from the ground up. On one condition. Name it. Grace gets the first engineering internship. She's earned it, watching her old man do this job for 20 years. Done. Gladly. Grace, now 20 years old and 1 semester from her engineering degree, walked into the newly expanded garage a few weeks later to find her father and Victoria Sterling standing over an engine block together, the older woman asking careful, humble questions about tolerances and materials she once dismissed without a second thought. Guess the CEO finally learned to listen to the mechanic. Took her 10 years and a bankruptcy. But better late than never. Jack Miller never set out to teach anyone a lesson. He simply did his job, honestly, quietly, for 10 years, long after most people would have walked away, long after most people would have stopped caring whether the truth ever reached the right ears. Victoria Sterling learned, in the wreckage of everything she'd built, that the value of a person was never measured by the title on their door or the price on their invoice. It was measured in the quiet, stubborn decency of showing up, telling the truth, and doing the work right, whether anyone was watching or not. Some people spend their whole lives being underestimated. But given enough time, the truth always finds its way to the surface.